Hello there. So I was recently asked a question in my Philosophy 200 class about if we should try to stop a suicide and, what could be the moral ramifications of it. And I could have just typed up a response, but I figured that it was better to do it as a video like this so that we could really kind of think through the multiple factors of the question. So let's look at the background. While discussing utilitarianism, we happened upon the difference between what's moral and what makes people happy, right? Even within utilitarianism, something can provide greater utility even if it makes the recipients or participants unhappy, right? For example, you could save someone from killing themselves, a moral action, because it increases utility, even though it might make the person saved unhappy, right? You pull someone out of a lake and they become very angry with you because they had thrown themselves in the lake to end their own lives, right? What you did is still a moral action, even though they're unhappy about it, right? Because society benefits from having them around. Society benefits as a whole from having them around. They benefit from sticking around, right? So the question was asked, if I fail to stop a suicide, does that make me a bad person? And according to this person, they say logic says no, my heart says no, but morality and ethics don't know what to think. So there's a lot there, and we're going to unpack it, you know, through this process, right? So the first question is, what does it mean to stop a suicidal person, right? Obviously, we're going to use common, plain English language. Um, and, if you see someone standing on the edge of a bridge, then obviously it's very straightforward what it means to stop a suicidal person, right? You pull them back from the edge of the bridge, right? But it may not always be that simple. You may not know precisely that they are suicidal, right? It may be one of those things that you're unsure of what's even going on. So, can we stop a suicidal person? Yes, sometimes we can. Physically we sometimes can. Other times we can't, right? Many people who are suicidal, they make plans for it and they think about it a lot and they come up with all these scenarios to try and make sure that it's going to happen. And there's only so much that a reasonable bystander can do to stop that. Obviously, if someone tells you that they're going to kill themselves, then you should try to stop them, right? But you may not know that. They might just be very depressed, right? And you might not know the depths of their depression, right? So that's the first part. Can we do it? Yes, sometimes, but not always. If they're really wanting to do it, it might be hard to stop them, right? So that leads to the next part of the question. What are our moral duties to others, right? So I'm a Kantian myself. I'm not much of a utilitarian. But, do we have duties to other people to try and protect them, even if it's from themselves? I would say yes, right? If we view society as a fair system of cooperation, as described by John Rawls, then we have duties to other people to try and keep them from harming others and harming themselves. And, what is suicide but the ultimate self harm? So we do have a duty, a reasonable duty to try and stop them. In Kantian terms, that would be a perfect duty, right? Like if you know they are going to do it, if they've accentuated to you either through words or actions that they're going to do it, then you have a duty to try and stop them. And you always have that duty to stop them, right? In utilitarian terms, it's a little bit different. In the utilitarian terms, it becomes a math problem. It becomes, well, is it going to create greater good? And, is it going to better society? And, most utilitarians, I think, would agree that that stopping someone committing suicide is a good thing. It benefits them and it benefits others, right? So, do we have a duty to try and stop others from taking their own lives? Yes, we do. Um, if we fail those duties, are we morally liable, right? So let's, going back to the part of the question, if I don't stop a person, does that from committing suicide, does that make me a bad person? What does it mean to be a bad person? Well, it means to be morally liable for bad things, right? So if we fail the duties to try and stop a suicidal person, does that make us morally liable? Does it make us a bad person? I would say circumstance depending, it can, right? So again, going back to the bridge example, if you're walking with your buddy and you come to a bridge and he says, you know what, I've had enough, I'm going to jump off this bridge, and you don't try to stop them, then you are morally liable, right? You had a duty to try and protect them, to try and help them. That's based on not just their relation to you as your friend, but as a fellow human being within a society. And you willingly neglected that duty, right? So you neglected the duty to them. But suppose the situation's a bit different and your friend calls you up and they say, man, I'm just feeling really, really sad. And you say, well, don't worry, things will get better. And then you find out the next day that they, went home and killed themselves. Um, can you be morally liable for that? No. I mean, as a reasonable bystander, you had no idea, right? So that's one of those things where you can only be responsible for things, for duties that you could foreseeably know, that you could foreseeably understand, right? And that's especially important when it comes to this particular topic, because it is the case that we might not know what a person is planning, right? We might not know what's going on in their head. If we do know, if someone says to you, like, hey, I'm going to end my life, then yes, you have a duty to try and stop them, to move heaven and earth, to call the authorities, to do whatever you have to do, because at the end of the day, that is a human life, and it affects not only them, but their entire community, their family, their friends. And if you fail that duty, then you have allowed a massive harm to come to an entire group of people. But if you don't know, if at the moment, if during the time you don't know and you could not have known, then, you know, there's nothing you could have done, right? Like, you can't be held responsible for something that you didn't even know about, right? Right now in, you know, Argentina, there's probably somebody getting robbed, right? And their life is probably in danger, but you don't know about that, and there's nothing you could do to stop that. So you cannot be liable for that. And it's the same with the question of trying to stop a suicidal person, right? So I wanted to make sure that I explain this out in full detail as much as I can. Can we have duties? Yes. If we fail those duties, can we be liable? Yes. Is that always the case? No. It depends a lot on the specific circumstances related to the issue, right? So I know this is a sensitive topic. That's why I wanted to give it the full detail and thought that it deserves. If you are someone who is curious about, kind of reading more about the philosophy behind this, pick up a copy of John Stuart Mill's Utilitarianism, or pick up a copy of Immanuel Kant's Metaphysics of Morals. And this will really help you kind of see the perspective of it, right? So to see an ethical view of it. Like I said, I approach it from a Kantian view, but a utilitarian view could be acceptable as well. So thank you for your time. I hope you have a wonderful day.